I think I would continue to do a lot of what I have done already, which is to lower the tax burden. Since I was elected to office and through a diligent and disciplined work, we have reduced the income tax rate from 6% to 4%. We ideally will be going to down another half point to 3.5% in very short order. I will do things that will continue to improve the educational environment in the Commonwealth. I chair the Appropriations Committee, which means I get to oversee the Commonwealth's budget. We've been praised for having one of the best budgets in education in over 20 years, while at the same time reinvesting in public safety and doing the things that provide for a safe place to live and a good place to work and a good place to raise your family.
So in the state Senate, I would fight to ensure that our teachers and public school employees get the raises that they deserve so that we can end the teacher shortage that's hurting Kentucky's kids. I will work to secure better benefits for our public servants, including firefighters, policemen, and teachers, and ensure that they receive the pay that they deserve and the equipment that they deserve to be able to do their jobs safely and effectively. And I also would like to ensure that the schools have healthier lunches. I feel like that's so important because kids learn better when they have access to nutritious food and fresh food choices. So that's kind of a priority of mine too. My number one priority in the next legislative session is to change the law to restore a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions. At the very least, I think that we can start by adding exceptions to Kentucky's extreme abortion ban for survivors of rape, incest, and non-viable pregnancies. That is a particularly strong issue for me because I myself had 5 miscarriages. So I know what this is like. And I feel like it is very important for women to have access to safe healthcare regarding their reproductive system. It's hard. That's a hard issue. And I know a lot of people are torn about it, but I feel it's really important because not all abortions are about birth control. Most of them are about saving a woman's life or reproductive organs.
Heading into the next legislative session, I think one of the things that I've proven is it does not matter to me which side of the political aisle people fall on. I believe government should be accountable and responsible to the electorate. I have called in previous years for reforms to the way gubernatorial pardons are issued. I have proposed that piece of legislation several times, and I will propose it again this time. I have worked diligently as a response to the pardons issued by the previous administration, and frankly, with historical precedent in other administrations. But that will be my number one priority in this coming session is to try to shepherd that much needed reform to the Constitution through the General Assembly. One that is being studied in the General Assembly currently and has been studied in previous years. It is something that will have to be addressed at some point, but we have to address it in a way that is smart because the needs of the healthcare community in Louisville, in Northern Kentucky, and in Lexington aren't necessarily the same needs that occur in rural Kentucky. And so as our experts on the issue continue their work to wade through this to understand the totality of the issue, I think it's vitally important that we take a look. It's a system that hasn't seen reform in many, many decades and probably needs a solid reform effort made, but it has to be smart, recognizing that there are very different needs in very different segments of the Commonwealth.
Well, I think that we should examine our certificate of need laws. We have to ensure that the need for greater access to healthcare is met without undercutting our healthcare institutions. I think that, especially in rural communities, We have to make sure that Kentuckians have access to quality, affordable health care and access to quality healthcare providers. I will be voting against Amendment 2, primarily because I do believe that money that's allocated to public schools should be saved for public schools.
I'll be proudly voting yes on Amendment 2. Amendment 2 provides choice to families who otherwise don't have it in their children's educational environment. I have long been a strong supporter of our public education system. In fact, the budget that we just recently passed was praised by the Kenton County School Superintendent as being the most education friendly budget in over 17 years. And have always advocated for that system. But there are children and families who are stuck inside of districts that simply don't provide the adequate education opportunities that their children deserve. And Amendment 2 will allow the process to begin to provide those opportunities for those families. Well, I think first of all, we need to remember that school funding is distributed based off of what's called the SEEK formula. That formula derives its origin in the Constitution of the Commonwealth and the requirement that we provide an equal or a common system of education. So as it relates to public school funding, we are very much restricted by the SEEK formula. But there are other options out there for those families in need. Previously, we had provided for scholarship tax credits for low-income families to be able to access. I will be a big proponent of ideas like that. There may be other ideas that come along that help equalize the playing field for those kids who are stuck in underperforming systems. But we will have to see ultimately what rises to the top. But I can assure you the most important thing to me will be that all of our kids are given the opportunity to engage in an educational system that provides them an opportunity to succeed in life.
First of all, I don't believe that Amendment 2 is going to pass. I think Kentucky voters are smart enough to know what's happening here. And I think that they all believe that Frankfurt should not be taking money from the public school system and then giving it to politicians or giving it to the private school system that's not accountable to our government. And I think that we should be focusing on making public education as good as possible, like, raising teacher pay and making sure that the teachers have the environment and the materials that they can use to give our kids the best education possible, a world-class education. I think that we should be focusing on implementing universal pre-K. If we do those things, then we will increase our ranking. Instead of being in the bottom half of the country in public school education, we'll be in the top half. I believe that the trigger law that went into effect in Kentucky should be repealed and the protections of Roe be reinstated. I think that we could start by adding exceptions, would be a good compromise, to add exceptions to the abortion ban to victims of rape, incest, and non-viable pregnancies.
The debate on the abortion ban continues to rage, and the misinformation that I've heard from the other side is frankly exceptionally disappointing. I've heard them say that there is no exception for miscarriage, and that simply is not true. There is an exception for that in the statute as it currently stands. And for them to assert otherwise is simply a distortion of fact. I've heard them allege that there is no exception for the life of the mother. And the fact is that also is not true. It is explicitly stated in the law that with the advice and consent of the attending physician, that those are allowed under the current law. And further on top of that, the Attorney General has opined that that is a right that is enshrined under the law. And so those are two of the just horrific misstatements that we've heard explored by my opponent in this current election. Obviously, it's a debate that continues to rage inside of the General Assembly. I have been and remain strongly and solidly pro-life, but remain engaged in that as things are presented in front of us. Absolutely. I would not only support it, I am the regular and primary sponsor of that legislation. Unfortunately, last time we saw some pardons that, quite frankly, shocked the conscience of many Kentuckians and it brought about the realization that there is a constitutional mechanism that allows one person to circumvent a system of justice that starts with a victim through a local police officer through a prosecutor, a grand jury, a jury, a judge, and in many cases, appeals all the way up through the Supreme Court. And that simply is not justice. Our system demands better. I have proposed a constitutional amendment and will be doing so again this time that limits gubernatorial pardon powers. It does not eliminate them, but it says that for 30 days before an election and between an election and a swearing in, there is no pardon power. What this does is it demands that a governor who uses that power stand in front of the voters and answer for his actions.
I think that we were all appalled by the pardons that Governor Matt Bevin granted, and we never want to see dangerous individuals let out of prison before the end of their sentences. I think that the power of the pardon is important and should be taken seriously and responsibly. I think that Governor Beshear would do that. I think that he is a trustworthy individual, or we wouldn't have elected him in our district, reelected him in our district by over 12 points. But I think that Kentuckians are smart enough to have seen the mistakes in the past and would not elect another person like Matt Bevin again. I don't think that politicians in Frankfort should be dictating what our colleges and universities should be doing. And like some effort to score cheap political points, which seems to be what's happening. The truth is that diversity is what makes our society and our Commonwealth stronger. Our colleges and universities are the professors and the leadership there. I feel like they were hired there and should be trusted to do their jobs, and we shouldn't be interfering with that. I don't want to do anything that would compromise Kentucky's ability to be competitive with other states as far as like making it attractive to young professionals that might move here. We need to keep our universities equitable and inclusive, and we need to keep our society the same. And I don't think that our government has any place in dictating that.
No, I don't think that we should. I think that we took a very deliberate and a very methodical approach to those programs the last time around, trying to strike the best balance for all the citizens of the Commonwealth. We received an overwhelming amount of input on both sides of the issue and tried to take the opportunity to ensure that we created a legislative environment and a law that provided the best opportunity for all Kentuckians, allowing those who are disadvantaged to still be able to obtain additional help, but at the same time making sure that we didn't do things that disadvantaged those who otherwise were being disadvantaged in the process. Well, the worst thing that we can possibly do to address the housing issue is to try to inject more direct dollars into the system. As we have seen over the past 3 years, when that was attempted at the beginning of this administration, inflation went rampant in the economy as a whole. Housing is an ongoing problem, and we need to do things to encourage an environment where building can occur without unnecessary impediments so that those who want to engage in the trade of building can do so. I'm in the construction industry. I got my professional start in life by doing concrete foundations for residential houses. I know the demands of this market, and I know that right now, the labor market for construction professionals is exceptionally tight. If we were to undertake a systematic approach that put more direct dollars into it, all we would do is inflate the prices of housing that's already inflated. We need to do things that reduce the burden on those who are building, that reduce the tax and economic incentives for those who would like to buy, and things that encourage a strong labor market so that people do have the dollars to afford the houses that they want to live in.
Housing is one of the most pressing issues in Northern Kentucky. What would you, as a legislator, do to address our local housing shortage?
Well, that is one of the things that while I'm canvassing, I'm noticing. People are talking about housing prices being through the roof and too high for a lot of even middle class families. I think we could build more inventory. We need to create incentives to make that happen. There was definitely a short supply of inventory for middle class families. But I think that even like even with the baby boomers, we're getting a lot of issues with baby boomers downsizing, and that whole market seems to be um, underserved as well. So I think creating like smaller housing units that are more affordable instead of like big McMansions, I think that's going to make a huge dent in that issue. No. I mean, yeah and no. Like I think that we'd all like to pay no taxes. I mean, who wouldn't, right? But I I think that if if we're realistically going to do that, that money's got to come from somewhere else. And in order for our state to be fiscally responsible, it's going to have to be investing in our infrastructure. Um, but I feel like if you take that money from our income tax, where are you going to get it? You got to either get public education and healthcare, or dramatically increase sales tax. So who does that hurt the most? I mean, that's going to hurt uh, working class people, middle class people the most. And that's just not what's good for Kentucky people.
Yes, I do, but I support it in a very responsible way, and that is what we have seen through the changes that I helped author and helped shepherd through the General Assembly. We didn't simply overnight cut our tax burden in half or eliminate it entirely on the income front. The fact is, income taxes make up a very large portion of the state's general fund, and we need a responsible mechanism to lower them. And 4 or 5 years ago, we put that responsible mechanism in place to help ensure that we had fiscal discipline at the state level. And that we would always have in the back of our minds as we crafted budgets the idea that if we were restrained in our spending, we would have the opportunity to reduce tax burden. And amazingly, as the tax burden has declined, the revenues have grown. And so people are seeing more money in their pockets as a result of these policies. But the corresponding economic growth is undeniable, and the success of this policy is undeniable. And we're doing it in a responsible manner. We will not get to zero overnight, but with restraint, we could ultimately end up there. I think that the biggest thing that I would like to address is that I've had the opportunity to serve for over a decade now in the General Assembly. And we are a part-time legislator. So I am in Northern Kentucky almost every single day. I run my business here. I'm raising my family here. I've coached youth sports here. I attend church here. I'm a member of our community. But I've proudly gone to Frankfort. As I mentioned, I chair the Appropriations and Revenue Committee. As such, I have overseen the growth in the Commonwealth Savings Account from nothing to nearly $5 billion, but I've also overseen an increase in funding returned to Northern Kentucky that's unparalleled in modern history for our region. At the same time, I've reduced the tax burden through the work that my colleagues and I have done. And I believe that there is no better way to demonstrate my commitment to the district and to the people that live here than by allowing them to keep more of their hard-earned dollars in their pocket and for them to decide where they and their family would like to spend those dollars. That has been the summary of my legislative career and the work that I have done on their behalf, and I hope to keep doing it for another term.
Northern Kentucky deserves a better leader than the one that we currently have in this district. And I'm a wife, a mother, I'm an author and a small business owner. I'm a creative person. I have a unique view of the world and our community because I'm involved in it every day. And I think that we need someone that is in touch with the issues that really matter to our society, our community, like affordable health care. We need a leader that's going to support our public education system. And we need a leader that's going to support a woman's right to make her own healthcare choices. So if you agree with me, then vote for me on November 5th.